My name's Ian Hatton. I'm a pre-sales consultant, mobile computing, based in the UK but covering the EMEA market. And I'm going to talk this morning about Windows 10 IoT Mobile, which is an offering we have on one product, which is the TC70X. How many people here have seen this product before or even heard about it? Okay, it's quite a few. That's good. It's probably not that well publicized within Zebra that we have a Windows 10 offering on a handheld. We do obviously have Windows 10 on both the ET50, which is the desktop version of Windows essentially, and also on the VC80. But we also have it on one handheld. This is a Wi-Fi only device, and we're going to look at a bit more at the spec. But basically, physically, it's identical to the TC70X, which is the Android version. So confusingly, we've got the same product code for both devices, TC70X, but one has Android, Marshmallow, and this one has Windows 10 IoT Mobile Enterprise, which is a bit of a mouthful, but we're going to abbreviate that in the presentation. Basically, the same hardware spec, more or less. It's slightly different, because we have to use a different Qualcomm processor platform in order to be compatible with Windows. But the important thing is it's the same accessories. So any of the accessories we have available for the TC70X and also for the TC70, because they are also compatible, you can use with the Windows version as well. So looking at the spec in a bit more detail, the major change inside is we use the Qualcomm 8092 processor. It is Wi-Fi only, so there's no WAN version planned, unfortunately, because for the EMEA market, probably a WAN version would be nice to have, but it's only Wi-Fi. Does support latest Wi-Fi standards, 802.11ac. It's got a standard 2 gig of RAM, 16 gig of flash. And pretty much that, from a hardware point of view, that's the changes. So if you look at the other specs, like for example the battery capacity, that's the same as we have on the Android TC70X. And same data capture capability in terms of the barcode scanner. That's the SE4750, which is our high-performance 1 and 2D imager engine. We've got 8 megapixel camera on the rear and a 1.3 megapixel camera on the front. So that's also a slight change from the TC70X. I think we have a 12 megapixel on the Android version. IP67 ceiling spec for wind and water and dust, and an 8 foot, so let's say 2 meter drop spec. So pretty rugged, 2001 meter tumbles. That's where we put the unit in the chamber and rotate it. So it's an accelerated wear test. And it's tested to go through 2,000 of the rotations of the chamber. So it's a pretty durable device and would be suitable for both indoor and outdoor use, but because we have Wi-Fi only, it's primarily indoor. So Windows 10 IoT Mobile, that's a long-winded name for Windows Phone 10, which is essentially what the OS is. Microsoft made some small enhancements for enterprise use. So we're going to talk about those. It's, for example, adding in a barcode API so that you can address the barcode scanner. We'll refer to it as Windows 10 IME because that's easier to say. Current support for Microsoft is until 2018, so that could get extended. That means that's the end of mainstream support, and then it goes on to extended support, as in support for critical security issues, which would normally be for several years after that date. So, but that's interesting, it's such a short date, short time frame, and I think that will become clear. The reasons for that will become clear as we go further on into the presentation, but basically there will be a follow-on OS which is probably going to supersede Windows 10 IME. So that's the main reason why it's on such a short support time frame. And the future really of the product, our product, is really dependent on what Microsoft do with Windows 10 mobile in general. So the issue really with the OS is that from a consumer point of view, Windows 10 has got a very small market share, which is decreasing. So whether Microsoft continue to invest in maintaining and supporting it, we have a user there. That's a big question mark, and the bottom line is it's a very capable OS, and it's very nice to use, but if it doesn't have a critical number of users in the consumer world, then it's very hard to justify the cost of actually maintaining and developing it for either consumer or enterprise. So there's a link there that just points to, I think it's a video with Satya Nadella talking about Windows phones and the fact that he's sure they will carry on making Windows Phone products. So they are committed still to the mobile space, but probably not with this current generation OS. And so the rumor is that Microsoft are working on the full Windows 32 API ported to an ARM platform, which is not just a rumor, it's actually a reality in terms of a desktop, because you can see actually on the web now there's videos of Windows desktop, Windows 10 desktop running on ARM with actually pretty good performance. But what is likely to happen is that will also be offered as an option on a phone device. So the only question there really is not whether it's going to happen, but what the time frame is to actually have that released as a product. And there you get basically the goal would be you get a phone device with sufficient power to also be used as a desktop replacement. So if you consider that a lot of desktop users not necessarily power users. They tend to use Office applications, web browser, social media, which are not necessarily particularly highly consume a lot of resources on the device. So the goal really, I think, with Microsoft's strategy is to have a handheld device that you can double up as a desktop replacement as well. So when you go to the office, you dock it into a station. It connects to your monitor and your keyboard, and you can use it, with good performance as a full desktop device. And obviously, one of the main advantages of the Microsoft strategy is you get backward compatibility with your existing Windows applications, which for a consumer is not necessarily so important, but for an enterprise is really important because lots of enterprises have lots of older applications which have been written over many years and which they need to be able to support on current generation hardware. So having that backward compatibility with the Win32 API, even if it's running on an ARM platform, is really useful and allows people to run business applications that have been developed over a long time. So there's no committed release date for that. It's possibly going to be called Surface Phone, maybe not. Surface product line is doing quite well in terms of the notebooks and tablets, but we don't know that for sure. And they have actually said in their financial report that their revenue from Windows 10 Phone is pretty negligible now. And that's primarily because people aren't really buying Windows Phone 10 devices because they're not sure what the lifespan is of the product. So as I said, we've got no WAN version planned for the TC70X, Wi-Fi only. We've got limited options for customization because the model really for Microsoft designing Windows Phone 10 is a lockdown model, similar, not identical to, but similar to the iPhone. So you have very limited options or flexibility for customization. We don't have a Zebra EMDK, and we don't plan to have one. So basically, the development environment, if you're using Visual Studio, you use the Windows 10 SDK, standard SDK, and that's posted at that link. We don't have a data wedge available currently, so there's no scan wedge out of the box at the moment, although I believe we have that planned as a development. So it should come in the near future, and you can also, if you wanted to, you could connect an external Bluetooth scanner, and that would actually, barcode data would go into the keyboard wedge through the Bluetooth HID interface. Standard OS image includes your Microsoft Office applications, so Word, PowerPoint, Excel. You've got Maps, you've got the Edge browser, Outlook email, Windows Store, and the Cortana voice assistant. So it's fairly well loaded in terms of default applications, and a lot of those are used extensively in enterprise, as standard applications. Interesting feature, and one of the differentiators with Android is it supports Continuum, which is, anybody here heard of Continuum or used it? No? Okay, so Continuum allows you to take the device and to connect it to a larger display, but rather than just showing you your small device display on the large monitor, it will actually reflow the applications to fill up the display. And so effectively, when it's connected through Continuum, it looks like a desktop OS, even though it's running from the phone. So quite neat technology, works actually pretty well, and is kind of a bridging step to what I was talking about, where you could use the device as a desktop replacement. So this is intended to do that. It's probably not optimum at the moment in terms of performance, and the fact that you can't run Windows 32 apps. So it will work with applications, universal applications, which have been modified to work with Continuum. So they have to be Continuum enabled. But you can't just take any application and run it through the external desktop connection. So that's the limitation, and that's what would basically be overcome when you move to a full emulation running on the ARM platform. There's a video you can see of it working at that link. I can also show you, well, let me just show you the next slide, which is the Continuum setup with TC70X. So we've got it docked into a cradle, you can see there. And on the back of the cradle, just connect a USB hub, plug in a keyboard, and we've also got a dongle there for doing effectively a mirrorcast connection. Actually, the dongle's plugged into the TV, so the connection from the device is wireless. We only support a wireless connection. We have a dongle plugged into the back of the TV, which is a mirrorcast adapter, and then you basically just search on the device for an external display. In fact, you run the Continuum application, search for an external display, connect, and then it will project and change the UI to fill the large external display. So just to show you how that's working on the device, there's a video here which I captured. Let's see if we can play this. So there's no audio, but basically this is a video running on the TC70X and connected to a large external display in our office. And you can see the actual video stream is smooth, it doesn't break up. It's actually, considering it's transferring that information over the Wi-Fi connection to the mirrorcast adapter, it's actually quite impressive in terms of the performance. And the point with this is you can also use the device while it's doing that. You can still use the device. So if you have an incoming phone call, for example, you can take the phone call and it won't affect the external display. It's kind of running as two separate processes. So quite a neat technology. And you can see for an enterprise, that's actually quite a useful feature, because it would allow you to double up with one device. You could use it as a desktop replacement, potentially. Again, probably would make more sense with a WAN device, because that would give you the flexibility to use it outdoors and then bring it back to an office. But would also work with the Wi-Fi version. So, the OS itself is based on Windows 10 Mobile, the consumer version, with some additional enterprise features. The UI is identical to Windows 10, so you get the same user interface concept, where basically you have what we call pivot tables. So when you run an application, just think of one that I could show that with. If you run the Photos application, for example, basically you swipe across between different screens. So it's quite different from Android in terms of the user interface, but it's pretty intuitive to use and quite easy to pick up. But having said that, obviously there is going to be a learning curve. People are using Android devices as their personal device, and you give them Windows 10 device, then there can be some, depending on how you design the application, there can be some additional training required. Screenshots of the UI, if you wanted to have a look, are at that link. It drills down into all the different screens. It does support universal Windows apps, which are designed to work across different form factor devices. So the goal for Microsoft really is to write one application which will query the device it's running on and will alter the user interface to fit with whichever device it's running on, whether it's a PC, a tablet, a mobile device. So it's a good idea, from a developer point of view. It allows you to keep one code base and to have that application running on lots of different platforms. And there's a document there that talks in more detail about universal Windows apps. The barcode scanning, as I said, we have very limited ability to customize the OS. So we actually, for the barcode scanning, we use the standard Microsoft barcode API, which is one of the features which has been added into the enterprise version of Windows 10 Mobile, and is not in the consumer version. So there's some limited samples of that. That GitHub link will take you to a Visual Studio project, which will allow you to run barcode scanning application. We've got no EHS equivalent. So enterprise home screen that we have for the Android devices, we don't have for Windows 10 in terms of locking the device down and actually restricting the applications that the user can see. But there is a lockdown method provided by Microsoft, which basically uses XML to configure it. And that link there, you can see that method. I think primarily it's designed to be pushed to the device through an MDM or an EMM product, like Windows Intune, for example. You can manage the devices through most of the current MDM products, so SOTI, AirWatch, Intune, they all support Windows 10. And you can, therefore, the easiest way to actually lock down the device would be to set up a device profile within your MDM and then push that to the device in order to do the sort of kiosk lockdown that we'd have normally through EHS. But you can do it manually as well, and if you look at that link, that will show you the method to lock it down just by pushing the XML onto the device. Limited MDM capability, I think, compared to Android, and that's primarily because the OS is more locked down than with Android. So that restricts some of the features that you can use that you'd normally use with an MDM product. You can make screenshots of the device. There's an application called Project My Screen, which you can get from that link. And that will allow you to connect the device to your PC through a USB cable. And you can then basically echo the device screen onto your PC. And so you can project the screen onto a larger display. There's no screen save on that, so you just need to use a screen snipping tool to be able to take screenshots. And that only works through USB, so there's no option for Wi-Fi connection. So the main development platform is Visual Studio, the main Microsoft supported platform. You can create applications in C#, VB, and also in Xamarin. The advantage if you use Xamarin, obviously, is you get the cross-platform portability. So if you were to build a Xamarin application, Xamarin Forms, you could target not only Windows 10, but also Android, iOS. So you cover the major mobile OS platforms with one development tool. Visual Studio Community Edition is free to use if you have 5 developers or less. So that's quite a good benefit for a small ISV or a small partner. That's very cost effective. You can also use other development options. So we can build web apps for the device using PhoneGap or a similar web tool. And we can also use a 4GL or a rapid application development tool like Calypso from SysDev, which will allow you to target Windows 10 as one of the supported OS platforms. So if you use Visual Studio 2017, basically you install the Windows 10 SDK. It's on the link, or install Visual Studio first, install the Windows 10 SDK, enable developer mode on the device, which is actually much easier in Windows 10 mobile than it was in Windows 8 mobile. It's been made so you can just enable developer mode through the settings. So that's very straightforward. And you can use Visual Studio, you can deploy the application directly from Visual Studio. So a very nice design environment and debugging and so on. Probably one of the advantages is it's more of a polished development environment than you'd have with other platforms. And we can also use PhoneGap build to generate Windows Phone apps. So you can use a rapid application tool such as App Studio, which will allow you basically to write your application in HTML and JavaScript and then build a native app, which in the case of Windows 10 phone or Windows 10 mobile is an application with the extension .xap. So that's effectively a Silverlight install format, but that can be built through PhoneGap. If you use App Studio, then the change that you need to make is you have to edit the project properties, and there's a config.xml which is actually used to configure the PhoneGap build, and you need to just add in the contents of the XML contents you see there. So by default, it's not building the Windows Phone platform, Windows 10 mobile platform, but if you add that into the config.xml file, then it will build for that platform as well. And just to show you how that looks, I can show you on here. So the advantage of using these methods is they tend to be quicker and easier to get up and running than if you use Visual Studio, which is quite a large install. Obviously, if you're already using Visual Studio and you're developing C#, for example, then that makes sense to use that tool. Probably would be the preferred method. If you're coming into this new and you don't know anything about the development environment, the Visual Studio development environment, then these can be a good alternative options. In order to use PhoneGap, you need to actually have set up a PhoneGap build account, which is very easy to do. You just sign up, and in order to build with it, you just need to have a key, developer key, which you can find once you've created your account. Here you get an authentication token, and that's required. If you build with App Studio, you need to copy that and put it into App Studio in order to be able to build using PhoneGap. So I'll show you how that looks on the actual tool. So in this case, in preferences, under PhoneGap, you just make sure that you copy your authentication token from the PhoneGap account into this field. So it knows when you're uploading your project, it knows that it's your account. And this is a simple sample application that uses some of the PhoneGap API features. So that's things like addressing the camera, getting device information, getting your contacts list, and also getting a barcode. That part doesn't work, unfortunately, with Windows Phone, but basically to build it, you can just say make native app with PhoneGap, and what it does then is take the project, upload it to PhoneGap, and it will build by default for Android and for iOS, if I had a signing key for iOS. And once I made the change to the config.xml file, it will also build the Windows Phone installer as well. So it's relatively quick. Build time can vary according to the load on the PhoneGap servers, but it's fairly quick. And then to actually download your applications, you can just hit the link, and it will give you a download of an APK file in case of Android, or of an XAP file in the case of Windows Phone. Well, actually, let's build an AppX file. That's good. So basically, though, it's pretty straightforward to use. And if you just want to demonstrate applications and build applications quickly, that can be a good option, especially if you're a web developer. Let's go back to the slides. So that config.xml change, that was in the project properties. If I go up to properties, scroll down, there should be a PhoneGap in there. So just hit that. I can't actually expand it, but in that XML file, I've just added the section to tell it to build the Windows Phone platform, which is not there by default. So when you get your application installer, you can just load that onto the device and run it on the device. And what that's doing, basically, PhoneGap is basically just taking the HTML and the JavaScript and wrapping it into a binary installer. So it's a web application, but it's wrapped into a binary that you can use to install it either via sideloading or through the application store. And then another option is Calypso from SysDev, which you can access from this link here, and that supports Windows Phone as a target platform, along with Android and coming soon iOS as well. So in that case, similar to MCL, you have an integrated development environment that you can use basically with drag and drop and adding scripting events to the controls. And you can build pretty sophisticated applications that way. It's a free trial version available, and it's licensed per developer seat. So you can build an unlimited number of applications, but you just license per developer. So basically, I'll just show you that quickly on here. This is the Calypso Designer, and here's my sample project. So I can choose to deploy for different platforms. I can test on Windows Mobile, Windows CE, Windows Phone 10 and Android. and I can also create an APK or an AppX file in order to create the actual installer. If I want to just test on a device, I can say create update and generate. That will basically build an update package, and all I need to do then is to launch the communication server on the PC, and on the device I run the Calypso client, which I've pre-installed on the device, and I just hit synchronize, and I have to pre-configure the IP address of the server, but it will connect to the server, pull down the application and install the update. So that's pretty straightforward to use, and as I say, it's got quite a good feature set. You can do some fairly sophisticated things in terms of web service access and so on. So again, that's a good option if you want to just build applications, but you don't want to invest a lot of time and effort in terms of building Visual Studio applications. You can do that very easily with Calypso, and you will still have the cross-platform portability as well. So if you have a customer who starts off thinking Windows 10, I really want Windows 10, you could build an application, sample application for them, and if then at a later point they decide they want to move to Android, then basically you don't have to rewrite the application, you can just rebuild it for Android, and you don't have any wasted effort there. That's just some screenshots of the client running on the device and synchronizing the application. And this app is just a simple app with a web view. Also does speech recognition as standard. Obviously in the platform you can do speech recognition. So that's callable from the Calypso application. So if you run the recognizer, testing 1, 2, 3.
123.
It's just doing an echo back of the speech. That can be useful if you want to do speech-driven applications. And pretty much that's it. So we're actually a little bit earlier than anticipated. We ran through that quickly. So any questions on Windows 10? You can see actually, yeah.
At the beginning you claimed that we can only use external barcode scanner.
Yes.
Because the API is still under development at Zebra, right?
No. What I'm saying is you can use the Microsoft Barcode API, which is published, and is usable. You could also plug in an external or connect an external Bluetooth scanner, and that would basically act as a wedge into the keyboard queue. So, for example, if you took a CS4070, you'd be able to read a barcode, and it would go into the currently focused field on the device. Or there will be an option for a data wedge equivalent as well, which would scan enable any application using a built-in data wedge.
Okay.
That's not released yet. But we are a bit restricted. We can't implement our own barcode API because the OS is locked down to the extent where you have to use what's provided by Microsoft rather than...
So you're using the Microsoft API, the barcode API to develop the wedge?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So, say the question mark over Windows 10 Mobile, I think the message we would give is Windows 10 Mobile, there's a question mark over it, depending on what the Microsoft plan is to support it moving forward. But there will be a follow-on to Windows 10 Mobile. And I think that follow-on, depending on how it actually is released and what the feature set is, that could be very interesting for large enterprises because of the fact that you'd get the backward compatibility with existing applications, possibility to use it as a desktop replacement. It's actually adding a lot of additional functionality that you won't necessarily get with other mobile devices. So it's kind of a watch this space. Okay, so I think we have a bit of time, extra time before the next session. So thanks for attending. Hopefully it was interesting.